All right, so my camera mic is not working. I don't know why. So I already got this set up to do the tutorial. So we'll just do the intro with this mic. Today, we're going to be going over mixing. You've seen it in the title. Let's get into it. All right, so the only thing going on right now is the kick and the 808 are in mono. Let's hear the mix before we do any processing to it. All right, so as you can hear, those key strings, especially the vocal, needs processing. And if you remember when I made this beat before, I actually already processed the keys, strings, and vocals. So I'm going to just go over the parts of those that I did do. So I'm going to enable the effects on them, and then we'll get into mixing the rest of the beat. So if we go ahead and start off with the keys, just so I could show you, if I press play, you'll hear the keys as they are. And then with the effects I added to them. So it was real simple. It was just an EQ cutting out a lot of the low end. I went ahead and took out around 500 because it was a little bit muddy. And then I did a high shelf at, what is this, like 4 or 5K. And I just boosted it up by about 4 dB to kind of brighten up the piano. And then isotope vinyl on it. You could see the year and the RPM that I selected. And then a little bit of warp depth. And then we have a reverb. So it is still kind of tucked in the back, but it is a really big decay. So it's a pretty big reverb, and then S1 to widen it out. So the only reason that I'm breaking these down as they're already mixed is because when I was making this melody in the beginning, this is stuff that I threw on to make it sound better altogether. It wasn't necessarily that I was going for mixing it. So for instance, on these strings without the reverb, they're very dry and upfront. So it's just one of those things where while you're making the beat, you're kind of throwing on effects to get it to sound how you want it to be, not necessarily focusing on the mix. But I didn't want to take all this off and then end up just putting the same thing back on anyways, so I'll just break it down. So next is the strings. So if we play the strings without any processing, this is what I mean. When I was creating the beat, it just sounds super dry. And then processed. So let's go over that. Let's solo the strings. All it is an EQ, low shelving some of the lows. Again, I'm taking out a lot of the lows of the main instruments because for this beat, I really just wanted the 808 to be completely down there. I don't do it all the time, but if it's something I'm intentionally going for, especially while creating the melody, you'll see that I sometimes might cut a lot of low end. And then I boosted around 18K. It's a little bit of that higher mid range, and then a pretty big boost of a shelf around 4K. And really just getting these to sound more bright, kind of how I did with the keys. And then these two together now. And then next is the vocal. That really needed processing. And you know, if you've seen any of my tutorials when I'm beat making, I always affect arcade vocals very quick. I usually bring up arcade and then I already have this preset set for a mixer. So I'll just go and choose it, which is an EQ and a reverb, so that the arcade can already be running through that, because as is, it sounds like this. Let me skip over. Now let's put the processing on it. The high end is way more tamed. It's pushed back. So all that is an EQ, huge cut all the way up to about 2300, and then a low cut up to like 400. So I'm really just using this low mid range, mainly all mids. It's always good to make EQ moves when everything's playing together. So that's definitely what happened when I was creating this melody. So with all the processing off, this is what it sounds like. And then we'll put the processing on so you can hear. So now let's turn the processing on. You'll hear that it sounds way better. That vocal, I'd have never continued making the beat with how that sounded. So definitely always throwing EQ and reverbs on my vocals to kind of push them to the back, depending on the beat that I'm making, but let's hear it now. So now that that processing is explained, we can get into the rest of the mix, especially starting off with leveling. So when I play the full beat, you'll see that everything has headroom, and that's all leveling within here. So I like to make sure that I have headroom in my mixes. So if I press play, you'll see the 808, it's peaking at like -9. Let's get over to the kick. Kick is at -6. Everything has headroom. It's not too quiet, but it's nowhere close to peaking. So I like to work with headroom from the beginning. So like I said, you can go ahead and set that in here and get the levels that you like. So right now, what I'm going to do is actually just get a rough mix now. So a rough fader mix, because if you can get the rough mix, meaning just like a fader mix, a quick fader mix to sound good, you're going to kind of be like 80-90% of the way there, as long as you had good sound selection, or if you're recording live instruments, you had good, recording, compression, EQ, all that stuff. So let's just get a nice fader mix going. I'm going to press play, go by ear, and just kind of get a nice mix. I'm going to bring this open hi-hat up so I have more gain to work with. We'll bring it up pretty loud so I can bring it down. And you'll see what I did there, since the mix is kind of quiet, is I just turned up the headphone level on my interface so that I can hear it louder, but I'm not turning everything up to actually get it louder. So I want to widen out this vocal. As you can see, I don't have S1 on it, so I'm going to use the normal widener inside of FL Studio. Take this and bring it over to the left, and it's going to widen it out. So see, with good sound selection, this is already sounding good. There's nothing on any of these. It's just good sounds. So now what I want to do is actually start to add some processing to make this kind of hit a little bit harder, especially like, let's say the clap. I want the clap to be a little bit brighter. I want the snare. I want to add probably like a clipper to it to just really make it hit hard. And then the 808, a tiny bit of distortion. We might clip the kick, but it sounds pretty good. So let's go ahead and start off with that clap. This is an EQ inside of FL that I've recently been using. So I'm just going to bring a boost around somewhere from 5 to 7K. Let's go ahead right here, click, and you see it's a nice bell boost. And this is going to add a bit of top end to the clap and make it a little bit, we could say, more crispy. So if I go ahead and solo it without, with. So we'll go over here and we'll turn down the volume so it's kind of level matching and it's hitting at the same volume. Make sure we're doing good with gain staging so we can actually make sure that it's sounding better. So let's go ahead and play it. All right, so for the snare, I want to use JST clip. It's a really aggressive clipper, so let's go ahead and throw that on. I'm going to turn ×2 on and bring this up maybe around here, and let me let you hear what it sounds like. Make sure to turn down your speakers or your headphones or your phone, whatever you're listening on, because it's going to get really loud, but let me just show you what it sounds like. So as you can see, I don't want it that crazy. Let's go ahead and bring the mix down to maybe like 30%, kind of layer it in. And then as you can see, we need to trim it back a little bit. So let's see what it was before. Around like -10, -11. And then when we turn it on, we're gonna need to bring this down. Let's see. A little bit more. That sounds good. It's kind of just a little bit more aggressive. And then I want to add one of my favorite EQs on it by Waves. So let's go over here and get that. And we're going to boost right here a little bit of the top end. Let's go like 1.5 dB at maybe 5 or 8K. Let's hear what 8K sounds like. And I'm going to solo it just so you can hear it for tutorial purposes. And it's off. And then back on. So it's just adding a little bit of high end to it, and then we'll make sure before and after that we're still the same. Yeah, this needs to come down a little bit. I always like to make sure that, I'm showing gain staging because it is important. All right, for the open hi-hat, I want to add like some distortion to it, which I don't always do. It's kind of random, but I kind of want it to sound a little bit more aggressive. And since that's layered really on the first kick and 808, it's really going to add like more aggression to it. So let's go over to, we'll just use Fruity Blood Overdrive. It's stock, it'll work fine. And let's bring this up just a little bit. So it just makes it a little bit more aggressive. And let's pull the post gain back. And bring it back more. I like how that sounds. That sounds really good. And then the 808, I want a little bit of distortion on this. I'm either going to use decapitator, saturation, or like a saturation from waves, or just normal fruity distortion. That's not what it's called. Fast distortion, fruity fast distortion. Sometimes I like the sound of it. I used to use it a lot back then. Let's actually use one of my favorite presets. It's this some preset, and then we'll blend it in. And this is what this sounds like with it on. So it doesn't like completely get rid of the sound that I originally had, but it does kind of change it a little bit. So let's go ahead and blend this in. Let's go maybe 20% for this. Let's hear it. So here's before, after. It's not crazy. It's not really changing it, but it is bringing it up front a little bit more, and it does sound better. I like it better. Let's hear it in the context of the mix. So here's before, after. Just kind of made it a little bit more beefy, kind of brought it more up front, but it wasn't like a crazy amount of distortion. So that's kind of what I like to do if I don't want to over distort an 808. Just kind of adding a little bit of upper harmonic content helps out a lot. I think a delay on the keys would actually sound really good. Let's go over to waves. Let's get H delay. And I have a preset here. I'll show you what it is. It's just a quarter note, so I don't have to adjust it every time. Ping pong. Quick feedback, nothing too crazy. And then I don't have any modulation going on. The filter is cutting up to about 200 hertz. So what that does is it's high passing it up to about 277 is what I have it set at. So everything below that will be cut out on the delayed parts of it. And then a low pass around 5K. And what that's going to do is on those delays, everything above 5K is going to be cut out. So it kind of tucks it in the back, but it also doesn't let it get too muddy. I don't have analog on, and then we'll kind of blend this in. That sounds good, especially for the parts where it's kind of going to cut off. Those delays are just going to kind of ring out. It'll sound good, but they're not too crazy. Let me show you before and after. So it's very subtle. The reason I stopped this, you can actually hear what the delay is doing. All right, so we're going to make some last changes real quick. We're going to bring this clap down just a little bit and then bring the kick and the 808 up in volume. So let's select these two. All I'm doing is holding control, and let's just bring these up a little bit. And I'm going to bring the distortion up a little bit more on the 808. All right, now let's hear the full mix. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did like this video, leave a thumbs up. You guys can follow me on all social medias at Lifestyle Did It. Make sure to hit my site, lifestyledidit.com, for everything else. Other than that, subscribe to your boy, push notifications. Thanks.